Over the next days their routines twined quietly. She worked on his horse while he mended her fence, repaired a shutter, fetched wood. They spoke in fragments as if language itself were shy between them. When they did speak it was always simple things: weather, wood, the stubbornness of horses. Yet something began to root itself between those small words. Trust, maybe, or the ghost of it. One evening the world outside dimmed into a gray hush. They sat by the fire, the air thick with the scent of coffee and pine smoke. Maka stared into the flames. "People in town say you were a scout," she said. Kohana's jaw tightened. "Used to be." "Used to be," she repeated quietly, tasting the words. "What changed?" He hesitated, gaze fixed on the fire. "Saw too much. Did things that stuck. Hard to wash blood off even with time." Her fingers stilled on her cup. "Time doesn't wash anything," she said softly. "It just teaches us how to carry it." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, shared and silent. After that, their silences grew companionable, threaded with small kindnesses. His hand steadying her arm when she slipped on ice, her voice gently humming a tune while he worked. Still the town's whispers grew louder. "She's taken up with a drifter," the merchant Elias muttered one morning when Maka came to trade herbs for flour. "Men like him don't stay. You do best not to waste your kindness." She met his stare, calm and unflinching. "Kindness isn't wasted even if it walks away." The room went still. She paid and left without looking back, but her hands trembled all the way home. That night, she found Koana sitting by the river, hat in his lap, eyes lost somewhere in the water's dark reflection. "They talk," he said when she approached. "About me. About you." She knelt beside him. "Let them. Snow falls on everyone. It don't choose where to land." He turned toward her then, eyes filled with something raw, uncertain. "You don't know what I've done." "Maybe not," she replied. "But I know what you do now." He didn't speak again, but his hand brushed hers, tentative like a question. She didn't pull away. Winter deepened. Days folded into each other, marked only by the sound of wind and the slow melting of ice from the eaves. Koana began building a small pen for her horses, his movements slow but steady. When she offered him food he smiled, a rare, lopsided thing that felt like sunlight through frost. The smile lingered longer than she expected. Then one morning she woke to find his saddle gone. His horse too. The cabin felt hollow, the silence louder than any storm. On the table lay a single note, written in uneven script. "I'll come back when I can stand beside you without shame." She read it twice, then folded it into her shawl. 4 days she spoke to no one, just kept the fire alive and the animals fed. Some nights, she dreamed of him caught in snow, calling her name, though she'd never heard him say it aloud. When the blizzard came she could no longer stay still. The wind howled like grief outside, clawing at the walls. Something inside her broke open, a knowing, a pull. She wrapped her cloak, saddled her strongest horse and rode into the storm. Snow stung her face, blinded her eyes, but she followed instinct more than direction. Hours later, through a blur of white, she saw movement near the cottonwood grove, horse tracks half buried, a dark shape sprawled beside them. She dismounted, stumbling forward. Koana lay in the drift, lips blue, breath shallow. She pressed her hands to his face, whispering his name until his eyes fluttered open. "Maka," he rasped. "Didn't think anyone would come." Her throat tightened. "No one ever asked me to marry," she said softly. "Maybe that's because I was waiting to ask someone to live." He tried to smile, snow clinging to his lashes. She pulled him upright, half dragging, half carrying him toward the shelter of an old hunter's lean-to. The night passed in fragments, fire, warmth, her hands never leaving his. When dawn came, the world was washed in gold and white. By spring, when the river thawed, they stood beneath the same cottonwoods, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. No preacher, no witnesses, only 2 souls, scarred and stubborn, learning the shape of home. Koana twisted a ring from braided horsehair, slid it onto her finger with a quiet reverence. Maka looked up, the first sunlight in months brushing her cheeks. "So this is what being seen feels like," she whispered. He touched her hand. "Feels like breathing again." Years later, travelers passing through would speak of the cabin by the river, of the man and woman who kept to themselves yet offered food to every hungry stranger. They said the woman still whispered to the snow sometimes, though not out of sorrow anymore. And when the wind carried her voice through the valley, it sounded almost like gratitude. If you listen close, you can still hear it between the rustle of pines and the hush of snowfall, a reminder that even the loneliest hearts can find their trail home, no matter how long the winter lasts. Snow moved like memory that evening, slow, reluctant, and full of old sorrow. The river had begun to crust over, thin ice shimmering beneath a faint silver dusk. Maka stood near its edge, her shawl drawn tight around her shoulders, her breath ghosting in front of her. Beneath the hush of falling flakes, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "No one ever asked me to marry." The words floated, half to the wind, half to the earth that had kept her company for 22 winters. They did not sound bitter, only tired, as if worn smooth by too many unspoken years. Far off, a horse's hooves cracked the quiet. She turned toward the sound instinctively, heart pulsing in her throat. Out of the pale curtain of snow came a man on horseback, tall, weary, wrapped in a long coat dusted white. His hat brim sagged, heavy with melt. When he drew close enough, she saw his face, the kind that looked carved by weather rather than born of it. His eyes were copper dark, reflecting both fire and distance. He stopped several paces away. "Evenin'," he said, voice low, rough like boots on gravel. She nodded but did not answer. In this part of the plains, strangers didn't linger after dusk unless they had nowhere else to go. He dismounted, his boots sinking deep into the snow. The horse blew mist into the air, exhausted. "Name's Coanna," he offered after a pause, pulling his glove off to rub the horse's muzzle. "She's gone lame. I heard there's a healer who lives near the river." Maka's fingers tightened around the edge of her shawl. The word healer had become her name more often than not. The settlers came for her salves and left before the steam faded from their breath. She had mended broken bones, stitched torn flesh, even once delivered a child, yet few ever looked her full in the face. "You found her," she murmured. He gave a faint, uncertain nod. "Didn't mean to trouble you this late." Trouble, she thought, was a thing that had long since taken root here. She motioned for him to follow, her moccasins whispering through snow. Inside the cabin, the small fire hissed in the stone hearth, scent of sage and pine resin curling upward. She gestured for him to lead the horse under the small overhang by the stable wall. When he returned, she was already crouched beside the fire, grinding dried herbs. Coanna watched her movements, careful, efficient, each gesture deliberate but soft, like a song played under breath. She poured hot water into a bowl, added powder until the steam smelled of earth and mint. "You can set her foot by the fire," she said quietly. "It will help the swelling." He hesitated before obeying, surprised she spoke to him at all. Most folks avoided eye contact when they saw his scar, the faint one that curved like a question mark near his jaw, a souvenir from a winter long gone wrong. Silence filled the cabin, shaped by the crackle of kindling. Maka worked quickly, unwrapping the bandage around the mare's leg, washing it clean. The mare shifted once but didn't resist. Coanna crouched beside her, trying not to stare. "You from the tribes north?" he asked finally. Her hands paused. The question was harmless on the surface, yet it carried the same edge he'd heard in many towns, a curiosity sharpened by separation. "I was," she said. "Now I'm from here." He nodded, accepting that as truth enough. Still, her tone carried something deeper, a quiet defiance wrapped in weariness. When she finished, she pressed a warm poultice against the mare's leg and covered it with cloth. The smell of sage filled the small space, comforting and strange. Coanna sat back on his heels. "You saved us a long walk." "You'll need to stay till morning," she replied. "The snow's thickening. You won't see the trail." His brows lifted slightly. "Won't want to impose." "You won't," she said, and though her words were plain, they held the finality of law. She rose, set an extra log on the fire, and busied herself with a pot of beans simmering on the stove. They ate in near silence. The rhythm of their breaths, the creak of the cabin wood, and the faint whistle of wind through the eaves became the night's only conversation. Yet beneath that quiet, curiosity bloomed like a slow ember. Coanna watched her hands move, precise, graceful, marked by faint scars from years of work. She never looked at him long, but when she did, her gaze seemed to read straight through whatever words he hadn't spoken. Later, when she stepped outside to fetch more wood, the sky had thickened to a sheet of white. He followed, drawn not by necessity but by some ache he couldn't name. Snow caught in her hair, silvering it like moonlight. "You live here alone?" he asked softly. She balanced the logs in her arms. "Alone's not the same as lonely." Her answer lingered in the air, a faint smile at its edge. He wanted to ask more but sensed the line she'd drawn, the boundary between silence and story. By dawn, the storm had slowed to a whisper. The mare could walk again though limping. Maka stood in the doorway as Coanna tightened the saddle. Her breath clouded in the morning chill. "Thank you," he said. "What do I owe you?" Just a promise to treat her kindly, she said. Horses remember what we forget. He hesitated, unsure if she meant more than the animal. I'll come back with proper pay, he added. She only nodded. He rode away, snow crunching beneath hooves until both horse and rider dissolved into distance. Maka lingered by the river, staring after the tracks until the wind began to erase them. She told herself it was nothing, just another traveler lost and found. Yet that night she caught herself listening for hooves that didn't come. The days that followed bent inward. The townsfolk arrived sometimes, muttering their thanks, leaving coins that clinked hollow against her table. Whispers trailed her name through the trading post, the way snow followed footsteps. They said she'd been cursed, that she spoke to spirits, that her cabin was built over graves. It no longer hurt the way it used to. Only sometimes, when the wind whistled through the cracks, did she imagine what it might feel like to be wanted for something other than what she could fix. It was nearly 2 weeks before Koana returned. His coat was torn, his horse favoring a different leg this time. The sight of him startled her, half relief, half disbelief. You again, she said, though her voice softened on the words. Me again, he echoed, snow shaking from his hat. Seems I'm not much good at keeping out of trouble. She let him in without further question. His presence filled the small room with warmth she hadn't expected.